So this week we are starting our new sermon series called The Story, in which we as a congregation, as a church, are going to walk through the Bible, the story of God, the story of us, and how we intersect. Last week we talked about the Bible itself, or Biblos, these little books that make up our Bible, and how we got them, how the Bible was created. We talked about kind of the order of the Bible, how it's not really chronological. And what it is kind of these little pictures of events or characters or stories that we've been taught in Sunday school, that we haven't been taught or don't know at all. And these little stories that come together and make this big story, these little pictures that make this big picture. But these pictures or these stories are not in order, right? They're not in chronological order. And so it's a little confusing. We don't know what goes first, what goes second, what goes third. We don't really get the context of the situation because this happened, of course, hundreds of years before Christ was born, or 100 years after Christ was born. And so there's a lot of pieces that we're missing. And so for the most part, the Bible is it's hard to understand. And so we get frustrated and we don't read it. So what happened was a guy named Randy Frazee and Max Lucado, they got together and they created this book called The Story. And what the story is they've taken the Bible and they made it into like a novel, right? They've taken the stories of the Bible and they put them in chronological order so it makes sense. And so you can read these stories and you can get the big picture. God's big story. And our story, how those two stories interact. And so we're going to be walking through the Bible this year. And then we'll be doing some small groups as well. Our children will be doing the story at their level. And so the whole church has come together to walk through the Bible. So this week we start at the beginning, right? Growing up, I loved going to the movies. My parents would drop me off in the morning and I could spend all day at the movies, right? Excitement of the big screen, the big sound, the popcorn, the pop. It doesn't get much better than that. And so over the years, I've gone to a lot of movies. I like movies a lot. Some of my humor has been based on movies. My wife thought I was the funniest guy in the world until she started watching some of the movies that I watched, and she realized that you're not funny at all. You just stole all your material from these movies, and there's probably some truth to that. But I love movies. I've become kind of this movie snob when I go to movies, especially since I can't go as much anymore because I have 2 young kids, and it just doesn't work all that great. And so I don't go as much anymore, so I've become kind of this movie snob. And I've created these rules about going to the movies, right? Like where to sit. Like you don't sit in the front rows. Very similar to church. You get kind of this neck cramp going on after sitting there for 2 hours staring straight up. How much pop to drink? If you get the big gulp, you'll be leaving every 15 minutes to use the restroom. So like a medium Coke is kind of where it's at, right? And the rule number 1, numero uno, always arrive early. It's frustrating when you arrive late to a movie. Ever done this? And you miss like the first 5 minutes, first 10 minutes, and you spend the whole movie trying to figure out what is going on. Who's the main character? Why is this person doing that? Why are they doing this? Because if you miss the beginning, you can miss a lot. And so I always think the best time to go to a movie is like 20 minutes before the movie actually starts, right? Which might be a little too soon for some of you, but hear me out. You get the perfect seat, which is mid-level, centered on the screen, right in the middle. You get your popcorn, your pop in hand, ready to go. You can answer the trivia questions that come up. You can see the previews the trailers are coming out, which gets you excited about like the movies coming out this summer or this fall. It's very exciting. And then you get the beginning of the movie, right? Well, the beginning of the movie is important. And just like the beginning of the movie, the Bible beginning is just, if not more, important, right? The movie starts out in God created the heavens and the earth. Right? And so who's introduced? We're introduced to the main character of this story. It's not you, it's not me, it's God. God is the main character. Right? And the attributes of this main character, what this character does, affects the rest of this story. And so if we miss the first part, then we really miss a lot of the story. The focus of the story, if you will. So it doesn't take long as you read through the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then he creates more stuff. And we start to learn what God is truly passionate about, right? It's not the birds, though they're great. He's not super passionate about those. He's not passionate about the animals or the stars and the sun, though those are beautiful things. There's nothing like a sunset or a sunrise. But we see what God is passionate about by the beginning. Genesis 3:8 says, we find God walking in the garden with Adam and Eve in the cool of the day. He's right with Adam and Eve, walking in the garden with them. His simple vision for creation was to spend time with them every day, to walk with them. God's supreme passion, we find the beginning of this book, of this story, is to be with us. To walk with us. To spend time with us. Maybe some of you have lived your lives and you kind of view God as this angry, cosmic killjoy who sits in heaven, who watches us with his feet up on a desk. And if he watches us, if things are going, if we're doing something bad, he just zaps us, right? Or you feel like God is distant, that God has forgotten about you. But from the beginning of this book, of this story, from the beginning of time, God has showed us that that's not true. That God is passionate about God's people. He wants to be with us. He's not forgotten about us. In fact, it might be a perfect time for us to go on a walk with God. So the story, the Bible, begins with creation. Genesis 1:1 introduces us to the story's main character, God, right? And so we go through these days of creation. These days of creation are very artistic. It's like a poem. Days 1, 2, and 3, God really places, these are places that God creates, right? And then days 4, 5, and 6, God fills those places with things, okay? And so you have day 1, you have the light and the dark. Day 2, you have the sky and the water. And then day 3, you have land. And then day 4, you have the moon and the stars, which fill the light and the dark from day 1, right? You have the birds and the sea creatures, which fill the water and the sky on day 2. And then you have, on day 6, the animals and human beings, which fill the land. They kind of all coincide with each other. And of course, on day 7, we know that God rested. The creation concludes with God's greatest passion, human beings. God's core passion is people made in God's image, which is depicted to us in the story of Adam and Eve. And God said, this is Genesis 1, verses 26 to 27, then God said, Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and all the other wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. All the beauties of the world, of the earth, the beautiful Grand Canyon, the beautiful sunrise, the sunset, the beautiful flowers you see on a spring day, all the beautiful things of the earth are secondary to us. We see the passion of God wanting to be with his creation, wanting to be with us. And this is the story of Adam and Eve. But then we see this creation, this vision that God has fall, right? We see Adam and Eve's rebellion. So Adam and Eve were created with this freedom and the power to choose, right? There's no forced love here, right? God gives us the choice to choose. And in this story, there's two trees, right? They tell the two trees. You have the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Genesis 2:9 and verses 9 and verses 17 says, "Out of the ground the Lord made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For on the day that you eat it, you shall die." And many of us know this story. We learned it in Sunday school or through pop culture, right? Adam and Eve rebelled against God, ate from the forbidden tree of knowledge of good and evil, and God's vision to be with his people is ruined. You see, God had this great grand vision to dwell together with us. And God's supreme passion to be with you and me. And God gave us the freedom to choose. And Adam and Eve chose out of that freedom to eat from this tree of good and evil. And this ruined God's vision. You see, once this happened, this sin got embedded, or like a virus, infected us, our nature, and who we are as humans. Because God is so good and so pure, can't be a part of something that is evil, that is sinful. And so God banished Adam and Eve, and he put angels in the garden to guard the tree of life, which you might seem a little cruel. Like, why wouldn't God want us to live forever? Well, the punishment was to die. And now we certainly die. We may live for a time here on earth, but that time is limited, as we all know. And so, and God is giving us grace. You see, God wouldn't want us to live forever because we are affected by sin. Because we are living in a world of sin and hatred, God would not want us to live forever. So we chose separation. And I imagine this broke God's heart. This creation that he was so happy about. He said, "This is good," was ruined. And the rest of the story, the rest of the Bible, right? Like I said, if you miss the first part, you miss the rest of the Bible. And the rest of the Bible is based on these first events, right? God is continually trying to reconnect with us, to get us back. So you start with this vision of what it was supposed to be, God's vision for us. We ruined that. And now God spends the rest of the Bible, the rest of the story, trying to reconnect with us. God's creation. The flood is the first attempt and to get us back. But it doesn't work because it doesn't deal with the sin, it just deals with us as humans. Sin goes on the ark with Noah and his family, right? Even though Noah was the most righteous at the time, he is still embedded. He still has a sin virus, if you will. Okay? And so that sin disembarks with Noah. The Bible shows us this sin and this damage of the human race in Genesis 4 through 9. And so God, during that part, we see how wicked and how bad the human race has become. And so God chooses Noah to build the ark and do a do-over, if you will. And a do-over of the human race after the judgment of the flood waters. The flood, of course, erased the human race, but did not erase the sin from Noah's family. We see shortly after the family disembarks off the ark, shortly after they sin. Genesis 9, 20 through 23, Noah, a man of the soil, was the first to plant a vineyard. He drank some of the wine and became drunk, and he lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his brothers outside. Dishonored his father. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. Right? So we see right away that sin is still present in the DNA. Right? There's still sin here. There's still that separation between us and God. And so at all of this, these two stories, so the creation story and the story of Adam and Eve, and then the story of Noah and the ark, I want to go back to the story of Adam and Eve. Because in the story of Adam and Eve, there's a clue that we're given of how God will eventually reconnect us with Him. Right? And it happens when after Adam and Eve sin, and after they sin, they become aware that they are naked. Okay? And they make clothing out of fig leaves. They cover their nakedness. God takes away the fig leaves and covers Adam and Eve with the skins of animals. Okay? So when God replaced Adam and Eve's fig leaves with garments of skin, He gave us a clue on how far He would go to fulfill His supreme desire to be with us, to restore that relationship with us. Even when we're ashamed, even when we feel vulnerable, He covers us in order to restore our relationship with God. But that covering up with the skins of animals required the shedding of blood. God had to shed the blood of His creation in order to cover up the nakedness of the vulnerability of Adam and Eve. God in the universe wants to be with us more than anything on this earth. Literally. And to restore our relationship, it requires the shedding of blood. Right? And we know the story. We know the New Testament, so we have the benefit of knowing this. So we know that we are restored through the shedding of the blood of Jesus Christ. God gives us a clue in this story, written so many years before that story, that we would be restored, that connection, that closeness with God would be restored through the shedding of the blood of His Son. We left that up to God. And as we go through this rest of this story, as we go through the rest of these weeks, and we talk about the judges and King Saul and King David, and we talk about Jesus, I want you to always remember that It starts with God creating us ruining that vision that God has, and then God continually pursuing us after that. Let us be thankful for the fact that we have a God who pursues us, though we do not